Well, hello, good afternoon. I can't believe it's actually raining here. It's been weeks and weeks and weeks since we've seen the rain, and the door's open and it's tipping down. And that marvelous smell when rain falls on very dry grass or very dry ground. I think the word is petrichor anyway. And I'm feeling a little emotional because somebody emailed me this morning to say an article is coming up about a game. I used to be in the games industry. A game that I worked on 30 years ago is coming out in a magazine later this year. And so I got the game off my shelf and had the mad idea to see if I couldn't deconstruct it or examine it or look at the 3D models. And so Claude is sitting in the background on sort of high automation, high analysis, jailbreaking the game for me to see if I can get anywhere with that. Maybe I can sort of recreate it a little bit. Anyhow, so we live in an amazing age where you can relive your digital past. I'm going to stop wittering on and crack on with the webinar. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm going to be talking about ways in which companies can use podcasts to reach new audiences and generate demand for the business. This is me. I run Articulate Marketing, and I've been in this business for 25 years. Having been a sort of freelance journalist and having been in the games industry for 10 years or 12 years before that. I host a couple of podcasts available on all good podcatchers, specifically From the Source for Black Dot Solutions, which is about open source intelligence analysis, and Behind the Data, which is about data integration, data issues. Increasingly and importantly, both of those things, which appeal to my sort of inner geek, are about other things like truth and trustworthiness and insight. And I think it's interesting when you examine any topic, however abstruse or complicated, and you get to some fairly fundamental issues if you dig and talk and think hard enough. We've also helped as a business several clients set up webinars that they either self-host and we've done coaching and things for that, or companies that we've done the technical infrastructure, but they've hired professional broadcasters or journalists to run. And many years ago, probably getting on for 15, 18 years ago, I did a podcast of sorts for Microsoft. Anyway, so I have some form in the sector or in the field. If you are building a podcast or you have one already, you know the first thing you want is an audience. Well, the first thing you need is somebody to say something. But for B2B businesses and with a marketing perspective, what you need to do is look beyond that and go, is this contributing to the business's pipeline? Is it helping us ultimately sell things? And that's what this webinar is about. It's about moving beyond building an audience and running a podcast and turning it into a demand gen engine. And this is important because podcasts are a meaningful way to reach decision makers in businesses. So the analysis and research we found suggests that more than half of regular podcast listeners are business decision makers of some kind, and massively over-indexed in that population, 18% are business owners. And not only that, but they trust podcast hosts, 23 times more than they trust social media. I mean, in part because they have a listening relationship or a visual relationship with those people. They actually see and hear them. So wouldn't you like a marketing channel where you're reaching influential decision makers, where your communication is well trusted? Yes. Another reason that I think podcasts are important is that they allow humanity, people's individuality, their expertise, their experience to surface. When I interview, open source intelligence analysts, sort of former police or, military intelligence or something, and they're doing extraordinary things, you hear stories and you hear insight and you have a discussion and you are able to relate to those people in a way that doesn't quite come across in writing, and certainly doesn't come across when you go and ask AI to just write something about OSINT or data engineering. That's increasingly rare. We live in this sort of tidal wave of content, not necessarily understanding or insight or engagement. And an interesting observation is the niche, the audience, and you can't really get much niche than data nerds or OSINT analysts. I mean, well, you may be, but I doubt it. The more valuable that authentic, genuine, real world voice becomes and how much more it stands out. But I want to sort of reset your expectations about what good looks like. And this is part of the reason why I want to look beyond audience numbers and downloads and listens. The expectation is not that you are producing a beautifully crafted radio experience, This American Life. No, if you want to do that, you should have started 20 years ago. And you're not setting out to be the Diary of a CEO or The Rest is Politics or Joe Rogan, millions of people listening. That would be nice. You may get there one day. No, the typical first week downloads 27 for a podcast. And if you getting more than 400, you're in the top 10 of podcasts, right? There's this sort of very thin layer of super successful podcasts and then a much wider range of other ones. So set that as the goal. But here's the way to reframe the thinking about this. Instead of going, oh my God, we're not Joe Rogan. Well, yeah, but you're not a famous novelist or a brilliant journalist, but you still put stuff out on your blog. A podcast where someone is listening and engaging and thinking and hearing with what you're saying for 20, 30, 40 minutes or more is like one of those precious can we get a coffee type of meetings that salespeople are so keen to set up. They want to, can we just have 15 minutes in your diary? Can we meet for a coffee? Can I have a chat? Imagine if you could have 27 conversations with an audience that cares about what you're talking about enough to give you that time, and who are over-indexed as business owners or business decision makers, and who are likely to trust you. It's suddenly, when you think about it as a way of scaling that type of engagement, 27's a lot, and 400 would be amazing. If you start thinking about it in this way, you then start thinking, well, if you were to get in the top 10 and be 400 per episode, which is an ambition, and it's not unimaginable, it's like filling a conference room every week for people who are going to listen to you. Be like if you got invited to a TEDx talk in, Basingstoke or something, and you were going to give a speech, you'd be really proud and excited. You could get 400 people listening to your podcast. Fantastic. So reset the expectations about production quality and about audience, and start thinking about the quality of the engagement. And why this matters in a marketing and a sales context is that engagement is sort of part of the journey of unpacking and explaining and manifesting what it is like to work with you, what you as a business or a company or expert or a business leader know, think, believe, feel, who your audience is, who your tribe is, who you are talking to. And that is a very powerful way of bridging the gap between I've never heard of you and I don't know who you are and I don't trust you, and I'm ready, willing, and able to have a sales conversation. It's a trust building experience and a warming up of a cold sales or marketing opportunity. that is quite hard to replicate in other ways. Probably the closest you can do it at scale is, at conferences or when you're giving, public speeches. It's not quite one-to-one, but it's not distant either. And think about what a podcast is doing that other kinds of digital marketing are not doing, right? People come to your website and they are looking at a page for a couple of seconds and moving on. They're looking at scanning, searching, trying to find that one thing that they want. And as Seymour Cray said, would you rather have your cart pulled by 1,024 chickens or 2 strong oxen? He said that in a completely different context related to 70s, 80s debates about supercomputer performance and processor design. But would you rather have a deep, meaningful, trusted, engaged encounter with somebody, or dozens of sort of drive-by, trivial, sort of scan kind of online experience? And I think podcasts are 2 strong oxen rather than 1,000 chickens. And we did a very brief bit of digging before this to find out on average how long people visit a client website, and it's about a minute and a bit, right, per page. And how long on average people listen to podcast episodes? It's about 30 minutes. It's 18 times as much attention. I mean, maybe they're doing the dishes or something, but it's still a more opportunity. It's more engaged. So let's put this slide on because it has animation. Same thing. And while AI is not going to necessarily do your podcast episode for you, it's not going to think about something to say or interview somebody or whatever, it can help massively with the production. You can get podcasts produced quicker and more easily, and you can do things with them that in the past would be time consuming and expensive. And I remember when I was doing the Microsoft podcast back in 2006 or something. I know, probably it was a bit later than that, maybe 2014, 15. And I had a pal who was a sound engineer, and so I would send him the recordings, the interviews that I had done, and he would then run them through all kinds of sound, audio programs to kind of level the volume and kind of and make it sound better and remove background noise and hiss and blah, 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 blah. And then he'd send me the file back with an invoice for his time about a week later. And, it was a faff. And now he would go to Riverside FM and you go, improve audio quality, remove background noises. And if you can hear drilling or the rain falling on my dog barking, remove that. And you can do things like, and this was science fiction 10 years ago. Have a piece of, you have the transcript, auto transcript of the thing, and then you can edit it like a word processor document, and the video and audio are edited a lot in parallel. So you're doing text to video or audio editing. Unbelievable. So you can produce you can do the production side of a podcast now much more easily than you could, and still produce stuff that is sufficiently high quality. So AI doesn't replace the content or the personality or the humanity of it, but it accelerates the production process. So I'm going to cover 5 strategies that can take advantage of this medium. The first one is people have gone to video for podcasts. Ironically, now it is the way that many people consume podcasts, which we think is an audio medium, but it's a video medium. Not only that, but YouTube as a source of content is very heavily used and cited by Google's AI mode, which means that getting your content onto YouTube is a good way of getting found by AI. And there's lovely long transcripts and that material, and it's taking screenshots of what's on the screen and so on, is a way of doing AI visibility. It's not the reason to do it, but it's a bonus. So now you can do high quality video on a laptop, or I'm using an iMac here, and with a tool like Riverside, you're capturing that video quality, not at streaming compressed lossy quality, but full HD. When you're actually editing the thing, you're not getting the slightly pixelated version that you're seeing live now. You're getting the full video. So your production quality is also significantly better than it used to be. And fundamentally, you're using the same tool. You just have to brush your hair and sort of, make sure your background isn't too distracting. Or in my case, don't care that your background is distracting. Second strategy: borrow the audience, but keep the trust. So you want to help tap into your guests' network, their reach, their credibility, by giving them guest kits with social media clips, social media videos, suggested post copy, transcript, links to your video. A good guest with a social media presence or a following will welcome that. Then you don't have to ram it down the throat, you don't have to force them. But if they share things on their LinkedIn feed to their followers, their audience, you're getting an endorsement, an amplification, a sharing, you're getting audiences. This, I think, is one of the huge hidden superpowers of podcasting. Third strategy is use it as a sales motion, right? So invite your ideal prospects to come and be a guest on your podcast and interview them. Be editorial. Don't treat it as a tricksy sales call. Occasionally people do that, so don't. But it can be a very powerful and highly leveraged way of building the kind of trust and relationship that can lead to a sales conversation. And I've seen evidence and data from various people, admittedly with some interest in selling podcasting services, that this approach can have a significantly improved conversion rate compared with cold outreach. So, use it as a sales tool. Strategy number 4 is about using that content as a source of other content that can be used to generate leads. So using it to produce social media and LinkedIn content, using it to produce blogs, and almost every podcast interview we do gets turned into a blog post for our clients. And it's a good source of high quality content, copy, because it's authentic. We talked to somebody, we interviewed people. And I remember my editor at Wired telling me once, when a story was a bit thin, Matthew, you've got to report it out. And I went, what do you mean, Laura? And she said, well, you actually got to go and interview people. We've sort of forgotten that, I think. Put it in your newsletter, put it in sales snippets, give it as an asset to the sales team. And you can go beyond that now with AI. You can use AI to build a corpus of knowledge into which podcasts and other assets can go, the transcripts and the recordings, so that when you're writing, say, a flagship report, you can pull in quotes and information and insight from that audience, from that population of interviewees and podcasts, or in a population of webinars, and turn that into a way of enriching that content. So we're now increasingly building AI libraries, or jokingly call them AI superbrains, where you can capture that information and then use it in content. The last sort of tactic is around tracking visibility, tracking engagement through podcasts. So there was a survey done by Refine Labs across 620 customers and $20 odd million of revenue, where the companies in the survey had no attribution or tracking to say that the podcast had contributed anything to revenue. The CRM didn't have any reporting on it. It was classic dark funnel. But when they talked to customers, they found that the podcast had been really significant in influencing sales. And we found this, in a parallel world with webinars, where we were really astonished actually last year when we did the analysis to find how many people went into our webinar series as they moved through our sales funnel. It was almost sort of bottom of funnel and post marketing into the sales engagement, where webinars had the biggest role to play. I I think it's the same for podcasts. So what you have to do is find ways to measure it, right? Find ways for salespeople to use it. Give them tools, give them assets, give them comments, give them snippets. Ask people, how did you hear about us? Ask people, have you heard of our podcast? I mean, if nothing else, you can build your audience that way. And tag guests from target accounts and track them after you've interviewed, if you've had them on the podcast. And then you can start building some data in the CRM to track and get some insight into that dark funnel to justify doing it. And in HubSpot, the campaigns tool is quite a good way, because you can tag all the emails and all the sort of interactions people have, especially around visiting your podcast page on your website, or custom events if you've got enterprise, when people listen to podcasts on your site, or open an email with a podcast. All these sorts of indicators and proxies for listens and engagement. So put the podcast in the CRM and track it. So in summary, go video first. Book guests who bring an audience and leverage their networks and amplify your content. Book guests who might become customers. Book guests who might be your ideal customers. I've got something interesting to say. Turn one episode into weeks of content, and embed the podcasting into the CRM and reporting to the maximum extent possible, so you can start getting some insight. And fundamentally, stop counting downloads as the primary success metric and start measuring engagement. Rinse and repeat over time, build your audience, and podcasts will become a significant tool in your lead generation, demand generation. Little bit about Articulate. We've been around for 20-something years, worked for 180 companies across content, websites, HubSpot, and branding. If this is of interest to you, write down your top 10 dream guests, send it to me. I'll tell you which 3 you should approach and why. If you would like to book a marketing strategy session with me, would love to give you 30 minutes of my time, a shoulder to cry on, a second opinion, some interesting Socratic dialogue questions. I will leave you with some new thoughts and new ideas and new ways of thinking, I hope. And if nothing else, I can tell you how I got on with my reverse engineering of Azrael's tier game. Lastly, next week, my colleague Joanna is going to deliver another one of her fascinating webinars. This time, she's applying her experience as a gastronome and an amazing chef, and also she runs our website team. So she's going to bring her experience of working on all the websites we've built. And talk about what the greatest chefs teach us about building successful websites. I'm looking forward to that myself. I'm looking forward to having a week off. And that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you very much